After 7 incredibly long, productive years, Joanne Roney is taking a step down as Chief Executive at Manchester City Council. We are so lucky to have her here today to talk about her career, thus far, her hopes for the city, and what she hopes to accomplish in the new place that she's going to, Birmingham. I'm Julia Hatmaker, editor of Place Northwest, and joining me today, I have the wonderful Joanne Roney, and I also have Dino Moutsopoulos. He is the managing partner of Place North and our head of commercial. He's been working closely with Joanne over the past 7 years to help really advocate for the built environment community in the Northwest. So, Joanne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And Dino, welcome.
Thank you, Julia.
So, first things first, I thought we'd just kind of establish, what do you think that your legacy is at Manchester? I know it's a massive question to throw out first go, but what do you want it to be?
Oh, it's really hard, isn't it, when people ask you what your legacy is, because it's not my legacy, is it? It's everybody who delivers for this amazing city that's achieved whatever we've achieved during my 7 years, tenure. So it's genuinely really hard. I suppose I'm just really, really proud, firstly, to have been the first woman to have been Chief Executive of Manchester. And with that, the advancement I think I've made on equalities, both within the council but also very much externally from the networks that exist here. So I am proud of that. And I think, secondly, it hasn't been an uneventful 7 years by which I've been the chief executive. So I guess the fact that I walk around this city, I live in this city, and I see the progress that has been made through the most difficult of times, it's just incredible, isn't it? And I'm in an emotional state, as I said at the start, Julia, about the fact that I'm now leaving this city. And I'm not lying when I say I often just walk around with tears in my eyes, because look how this city does when other places are struggling. Look at how everything that is said about Manchester, about its partnerships, its culture, it's the way it pulls together, is so evident. And to have been part of that and to have played my part in leading elements of that, my heart's full.
Now, I only came to Manchester 3 years ago, so I'm still relatively new to the city in that aspect. But Dino, you've been around for a while, so how do you feel like the city's changed in the 7 years that Joanne's held the reins?
Indeed. Well, it certainly has, hasn't it? And I think it's testament really to, seeing some of the work that's gone on in the city, but how it's been done at such a rate, at such a quality through those periods that Joanne's mentioning. We obviously had the awful experience of the bomb, and then COVID, and then also starting a new role for somebody who's starting from a new position in the city. It's incredible how 7 years has gone so quickly and so much has happened.
So let's travel back in time. Let's go back to your first day. It's 2017. You've just taken the post. What were your first impressions of Manchester?
Well, I was so excited to be here. I actually knew I'd got the job in December, and I celebrated at the Christmas markets, so Manchester's Christmas markets, and I just loved it. I was so excited to come to this city. And then my next memory is walking into the town hall on my first day, and it was so daunting. It was so, just walking into that building, it kind of hit me that it's you, Joanne, here in this, hugely historic and significant city. It was daunting. And then, of course, I'm standing on the shoulder of giants here, aren't I? I've got absolute legend with Sir Howard's legacy to work on and to build on. And I was really, really conscious of there's 22 years worth of experienced leadership. And then there's me. Nobody knows me. Who am I? I don't know anybody in this city. So thinking through quite carefully how I would position myself, and working really closely with Sir Richard about managing that transition, and being really clear that the first order challenge was around improving council services, which were not functioning to the level that they needed to be. whilst at the same time being absolutely clear that our ambition for growth and the focus on growth had to be delivered. So, yeah, daunted, excited, but really clear about what was expected of me right from the start, set out clearly by Sir Richard. Clearly, children's services were in intervention. There was quite a lot of homelessness. I think there was some concerns around environmental standards in the city. So there was an agenda at having to kind of reset the base about those core services and to improve those core services. And that's difficult when you come in as a leader, because you're not, as a brand new person, you're not walking in to suddenly tell Manchester it's not good enough. No. But you are walking in to say, actually, Manchester, we need to do better in some of these areas. It's great being successful in this part of the business, economic growth, some of the outstanding work that was taking place in some parts of the council. But actually, we've got to make sure the people who live in this city are feeling that. And there was a disconnect between what services people were getting, as well as seeing some of the fantastic buildings going up and some build. So, yeah, having to reset the fact that the whole council needed to pull together as one, and that we had to earn the respect of our residents by delivering basic services. Mm. It felt lonely at times to be the voice that was saying that, but it was unarguable that we needed to make some improvements in some of our services, and that's why children's going from intervention to good is such a great, story to tell for Manchester, really, in the toughest of times, and the amount of change that we brought in to deliver integrated health and social care. There was a lot of people outside wouldn't see it, but there was a lot of internal change to bring in to kind of increase the level of service that was given at a time where there was no extra money. So that's the other bit you've got to remember. I had no money to do this, so I had to organise differently from within. And
would you say, 7 years now, do you think that's started to happen? It's a short period of time to turn that around.
It took 3 years, and then we got into the best companies list, the top 100 best companies, which was a measure we were using to track whether we were making progress within the council or not. So that was a great achievement to get that. I think we were on a real sound footing and really good progress in a number of areas. And then COVID hit, and I think, I remember just before COVID, we got to the point where for the first time the life expectation and life outcomes for residents of this city had stopped declining and was starting to improve, and you started to get a real sense that actually the work we're doing now is penetrating into those really difficult, complicated issues where people's lives are being transformed by the things that the council's doing. And then we had a little thing called COVID, which blew all of that progress out of the water a bit, really, and has put us back a bit.
Let's go into COVID, though. So obviously that put all local authorities under pressure, and if there were any cracks, I just felt like they got expanded and all the problems really came to the forefront. What was it like trying to help the city through that time?
Well, I suppose by then I was quite established in the city, and the council was really high performing and functioning well. So in a strange way, Manchester just switched into doing what Manchester does best, really, which is taking control of what we thought needed to happen for the people who lived here, and not waiting for kind of government to tell us what to do, which is very much not Manchester, is it? Manchester's kind of, we'll decide what we need to do and then we'll ask the government what support we need. So I remember Sir Richard was really clear, this is a national emergency, we go into emergency footing mode. What do we need to do? Let's have a plan. Our plan had 3 strands for it. A strand of work around impact on council services. So what do we continue to do it and how do we continue to do it? What do we stop doing and deploy resources? What's the business impact on us? The second one was impact on our communities in Manchester. So what do we need to know and what do we need to do for the people in this city? And then, the third one, absolutely unusual from anywhere else in the country. The third one was we start now on the economic recovery. We reached out to the private sector. Again, very Manchester, to reach out to partners in the private sector to say, this is going to have an economic impact. We don't know how long this is going on for, but we know it's going to have an economic impact. So we want to set up a structure now for the private sector to help us plan for what we do after this. I don't know anywhere else that did that from literally the day it was announced that we were entering a pandemic, an emergency plan. Manchester did have an emergency plan, I should say, for a pandemic. We actually had one. So, being able to galvanise my senior team against what we would do and where they would be deployed, we were able to do that quite quickly.
I feel like Manchester has an emergency plan for any scenario possible, not just a pandemic, but there's bound to be loads more. I'm right, aren't I?
You'll know that I think it was about 6 or 7 weeks into me getting the job, there was clearly, as Dino mentioned, the arena bomb. I didn't have time to read Manchester's emergency plan at the time, but what I do know is we were pretty clear what needed to be done, and the same principles have guided Manchester all the time on any level of adversity, really. What's the right thing to do for the people who live here? I mean, that is just so in the thinking. Whatever the strategy says, it starts at that point, really. So, but yeah, we know how to respond to the unexpected. I think that's pretty much in the DNA here. I always remember one of my kind of most significant memories was after the vigil had occurred, and I hadn't been home for days. I was probably just a bit traumatised and shell-shocked myself, really. And I remember walking back through the city of Manchester, and there was just such a incredible atmosphere of resilience and coming together. And I was sort of remember feeling there was this joyousnness and sadness mixed in the city. It was and just walking around on my own, feeling lost and emotional. So it was it'll live with me forever.
I remember watching that go, the news happen in America at the time when we were all glued to our TVs going like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened, and how horrible is it? And immediately what we kept seeing was the bee came forward, and everyone was like, we're a hive, we're a network of people together that come together. And it was something that struck me all those years ago in a small newsroom in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and we were just in awe of Manchester's spirit. And it was so clear that tragedy wasn't going to tear it down, and that this was a city that focuses on building up from destruction and horribleness. And that was something that kind of, when I found out later I was going to move to Manchester, years later, I was like, oh, I remember this city and I remember this spirit, and that's a place I want to be.
I think that was the point. We knew this was going to be globally significant, and we knew Manchester was going to be judged and viewed through the lens of how it dealt with it. And so many people came forwards to help in so many different ways, right? From Traffic Council doing the One Love concert, and the airport diverting planes to allow people to come in, to the performers on the vigil, Longfellow poet. Just so many people just there offering help, being available, doing whatever was needed. It was quite something, it really was. But you mentioned the bee. One of the things that people don't know is the kind of behind the scenes to all of that. But one of the things that we were having to do on the night, actually, was protect the copyright of the bee, because we knew people were going to, there was quite a lot of online attacks to try and set up false Just Giving pages and various other things. So people probably won't know this, but armies of my legal staff turned out overnight and were protecting the copyright on the bee, and also set up the We Love Manchester Emergency Fund in order to prevent kind of some online activity that could have brought us into disrepute. So, when I say a whole council response, I mean a whole council response. Didn't matter where you worked in the council, you turned up that night and you did whatever was needed for as long as we needed you.
Now, continuing this look back, but with a happier note, what would you say is your biggest accomplishment that you've had these 7 years?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know what my biggest accomplishment is. I just, I'm just really pleased that, as I said at the start, really, that we've continued the progress. I mean, there's always some notable things that have happened, like Viva Studios opening, Co-op Live opening. Those were big achievements. I like the fact that we've got a number of key schemes away. My first deal that I signed was with FEC for Victoria North. I mean, that's a massive regeneration programme. Really pleased about that. I think it's been, great to work with the combined authority and look at what we've done on the devolution deal and the Trailblazer deal. And I've led on work and skills there. So it's 181 million of devolved funding to the combined authority to transform skills for people. There's a lot of big stuff that's happened. But as I said at the start, that's an effort involving a hell of a lot of people. It's just been great to be part of it, really.
Now, you also mentioned those 3 policies or areas you really wanted to address when you came in, environmental issues, children's services, homelessness. If you were to grade your performance, how do you feel like you did? Is there something that you're like, I wish I could have done more on this?
I think the team who have led the transformation in children's services have done a great job, and putting my support behind them has been key. I'm really proud of that, and to be in a position where I think it's somewhere like 86% of our schools are good or excellent. They weren't. We had the worst performance of young people not in education, employment or training. We're not anymore. I think 96% of our early years facilities are excellent. These are the foundations for the future of Manchester. So I'm really proud of the work that was done in children's. On homelessness, I think we were doing a great job on homelessness, joint with Andy, because Andy joined about the same time as me. So that partnership around tackling rough sleepers, again, making huge progress. It saddens me to see that hasn't continued post-COVID, actually. That's one of the areas that we haven't got back to where we were. It's actually, continues to be a major struggle for us in the city. And on environment, I think, really proud of the net zero ambition and the first wave of that in terms of the council's own emissions and our own buildings and our focus on net zero has been good. I think there's still loads more to do. We've got to enter the next phase of net zero, I think, particularly with the lens of the place that we're creating here. I think we've done some of the building works. We've now got to move into the built environment outside of the council assets and move into, a bit of green space. But I was here when Manchester's first park in 100 years was opened at Mayfield, so I'll chalk that up for a bit of success. Who knows, I will come back and enjoy the new Piccadilly Gardens at some point, hopefully, and the Ancoats new park that's opening. So that focus on green space, the blue and green lung, I think that's something that I haven't cracked, but have set the foundations in place, I think, for the next part of Manchester's journey.
Yeah, it's a lot of people attribute the sort of bounce back of Manchester to having that critical mass of people living in the city centre, living close to Manchester, and then having somewhere to go as well, being the second bit to success. So having so many residents and some green space, clearly a recipe for success, COVID or no COVID. How does that look, do you think, going forward?
Well, I live in the city, so I absolutely get that. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that legacy from COVID about the flexibility of working, I think sometimes people think it's home working or office working. I don't think it's just as clear as that. I think it's working in different ways in social environments, in hybrid working, and that includes needing decent outdoor space that people can enjoy. So I think that was one of the things that when we sort of came back from COVID, we accelerated our focus. And Bev, as the new leader, Bev Craig, the new leader, are really clear about this as part of the economic strategy, and her focus in terms of where we take the next wave of regeneration in the city. I think very much looking at it through the lens now of infrastructure and not just kind of the targets around build. They're important. House building, absolutely key. Economic growth and business, absolutely key. But it's the place that we're creating, the connectivity of the places, and that includes walking, active travel, green spaces, enjoying the area. So a greater focus on that area for sure moving forwards. Now and in the future, I think.
So I wanted to take a moment to chat about leadership. Joanne, you're obviously a chief executive. We have many listeners who are chief executives or want to be chief executives down the line. And I want to hear from you, what do you think makes a good leader for a city council or a company?
Okay, so I think you have to have a vision, but that vision's got to be rooted in what matters to you or your business or your purpose. So you need to know your purpose, don't you, in order to command the respect and to lead an organisation. So always starts with that. Are you clear about what you're trying to achieve, why you're trying to achieve it, and who you're trying to achieve it for? I think the second bit for me is that you build the team around you. No leader's perfectly formed, demigod with superpowers. You need to know what your own strengths are, but also build the team around you. And that's why I genuinely talk about it being a legacy that's shared by everybody, not an individual, because it has to be a collegiate effort and a corporate top level kind of buy-in from a lot of people. So build your team. I guess the third bit is know yourself, know what drives you and what your values are and how are they influencing the organisation. So I think good leaders are value-led, and I think those values are ones that others buy into as well, be them in the organisation or be them partner organisations. But being explicit and clear about what you stand for and why that matters, I think is important. And then it's about listening, isn't it? Because I always say to my staff that I started work as a 16-year-old apprentice, so I spent more time learning the ropes and working my way up the organisation than I did at the top of the organisation. And I never forget that the answers lie in the organisation. If you want to innovate, if you want to change, if you want to do something differently, ask the people who are doing it now. They'll know, they'll tell you what to do. So always be a good listener, always be open and accessible. Never think all the ideas have to come from you, but keep a focus on your organisation's culture. That's what matters. Are you building the culture, the team, the empowered individuals to really move forward and to create honesty and openness about what's working around here, what isn't working around here? You do that, that's when you start looking for where's the future, what's the opportunities, where do we go next? You don't build that, your tenure is going to be short term because you're just window dressing, aren't you? It's not about you, it's about what you're building.
Indeed, and I think, for somebody who runs an SME and the amount of business leaders out there, there's lots of them. I always think it's a bit of a balance of finding that team that's got the same core ethics that you have, and then trying to take the risks in order to take that small business on. Decisions are very difficult sometimes for small businesses to make because they see the opportunity, but it seems so very far away sometimes, and you have to try to make those difficult decisions. And I think that's something that's been very challenging in this last few years.
You're right about risk, and of course the public sector risk versus private sector risk are really different, aren't they? That risks exist in both, but they are different. But as a leader, I think you do need to work out how you feel about risk, and actually I think being bold and brave as a leader is probably better than being a risk-averse leader.
I couldn't agree more.
So working up what being bold and brave means, because they're easy words, aren't they? But having your own personal resilience to get into the space where you might be the only person making that decision and it's all on you. These aren't characteristics that you just wake up one morning and you've got them. So how you build your personal resilience, your networks, your contacts, the people that you trust. That's where you get to becoming a brave leader that says, you know what, I'm calling this. We're doing it this way for these reasons.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think I've always thought that when it comes to risk, it's if you don't break it completely and it's worth carrying on and delivering something more, you've learned and you've done it. If you don't do it, you're going nowhere. You just want to tread water. So I've always been on that riskier side of decision making. Hopefully not broken too much along the way so far.
I think that's probably explains why I've just decided to take the biggest job in local government, doesn't it? I'm going to struggle to say I'm risk averse, having just decided to do this. So, yeah, I think there is something about being brave.
One thing I wanted to chat with you about is that you talked about when you first came in that you had these big shoes. There's a big personality who was right beforehand, so Howard Bernstein. How did you come in and make that role your own? Because, you know, Bernstein's the past. You were the present and the person we looked to for leadership. So how did you make it so that everyone was like, let's talk about what Joanne wants, and then kind of, you know, put Sir Howard on the back burner?
I don't think anybody ever put Sir Howard on the back burner. But, well, the only way for anybody to lead is to be themselves. I couldn't be a poor imitation of Howard, which I would have been if I tried to be him. I couldn't just replicate him. I had to be me. I had to trust me to be me and not get pulled out of shape, and stick to what I was doing, who I am, you know, the way I conducted myself. I mean, I was acutely aware of the millions of eyes on me, and I was acutely aware of any wrong foot, and, you know, there was going to be plenty of people pointing it out to me. So I just had to kind of not be overwhelmed by that, but to just stick to I'm really clear what I'm here for, what I'm focused on, who I am, and I kind of hope that when people got to know me, they might like me or respect me, or even just kind of acknowledge she's all right, she knows what she's doing. And I guess the other bit of that is to make sure you've got people around you who you do trust. And they're not always inside the organisation. Quite a lot of the people who I was really supported by in Manchester were outside of the organisation, and they were good, trusted voices who wanted me to succeed because they want the city to succeed. It wasn't anything beyond wanting me to do well. And so there were a range of people who were there to call upon, to seek advice from, to tell me whether things weren't right, to give me feedback. And of course, you know, Sir Richard was never shy of advising me where he thought I was doing well or where I wasn't doing well. So, but you have to be open to that, don't you? You know, you have to be open to you're going to make some false steps. You might get things a little bit wrong. You know, just. But that's being yourself. If you can't be yourself, you're not going to be an authentic leader, are you? You're just going to try and replicate somebody else's style. It's not you. It's not going to work.
I've heard you say a number of times at different events about how strong your relationship was with Eamon Boylan, ex-Chief Executive of Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I imagine he's one of those trusted voices. Oh,
100%. Yeah, 100% Eamon. I mean, Eamon and I have known each other for many, many years, but I suppose that he just moved into the Combined Authority role, I just moved into the city role. How lucky was I to have somebody I consider a friend to be in an external organisation, but working in parallel. He wanted the city to do well. I wanted the CA to do well. He knew the city better than I did. We were able to talk a lot and, you know, steer each other really and help each other. And that was a great network from day one. Shared agenda, shared commitment, and mutual respect, plus friendship and wine. That's lots of wine helped considerably.
And it's interesting, Larry, whilst you think about it, obviously we've got a new Chief Executive of the Combined Authority in Caroline Simpson, and there will be a new Chief Executive of Manchester City Council soon as well. So it's following each other somewhat.
Yes, and that's okay, isn't it? It's good, actually. I think it's great that talent and network exists in this city. I don't know where the next Chief Executive of Manchester will come from, but what I do know is when they get here, they will find themselves instantly in a place where people want you to succeed. They'll absolutely tell you when you're not, but they'll start from wanting you to succeed. So my advice to anybody listening who's using this as research for my job would be to build those networks internally and externally, because they are key to your success.
Now, we've talked before in the last section, we talked about the bomb, the COVID, two very important, disasters is the word I'm going to use for this. You're going to Birmingham, which has had a rough time, to put it lightly. What would be your advice about people coming into situations where they need to be a leader, but the situation itself is messy, a crisis moment? How should they handle it?
It's difficult to talk about Birmingham specifically until I'm there, but, I know what's clearly been reported, and it has got some challenges. I think one of the issues for Birmingham for me is a number of these challenges are sort of self-inflicted challenges by things not being resolved many years ago. So I guess the first thing I'd say to someone is get it out on the table at the start. What isn't done here? What isn't finished here? I'm hoping not to leave too many kinds of things behind, but, the job of a chief executive in the local authority is never done. It's never done. It's an impossible job and it's never done. So, of course, whoever follows me will pick up bits of things that haven't been done or haven't been completed. So I think the lesson there is to get it all out on the table. Absolutely. Going right back to where we started in the talk, Julia, the clarity that I was given about what was important and what mattered was the kind of compass that got me through being new and navigating the city, because I was dead clear what needed to be done. Not my ideas, but it was articulated throughout the process. Sir Richard was really clear, as with council, what they wanted to see by way of improvement and what my first order issues were. And I think that is what I will be doing in Birmingham. It will be, what else is there? To an extent, some of that's done because the commissioners are in, so there's a lot of the kind of getting it out on the table, and that then we galvanise around what are the priorities and how we're going to progress that. The second thing I'd say is it's to get that balance between what needs fixing and what's great and needs celebrating. And I think Manchester's always been good at that. It's always been clear about what it's brilliant about. Which maybe was a bit of a struggle to surface what it wasn't brilliant about, but it's always been clear about what it's brilliant about. I think what I've got to do in Birmingham is to remind it that it does some stuff really, really well, actually, and the bits that are broken will need to fix. But let's not forget there are some things about Birmingham that are really good and need to continue to be delivered and to be celebrated and recognised.
What can you take from Manchester? What can you take from learnings of the built environment, should we say, and the property side and the investment side and the public realm, and take and give to Birmingham?
So I think there's a couple of things. I think one is the extent of long-term partnerships and the extent of engagement. And one of the things that the built environment in particular say to me is how accessible I've been as the chief executive, as has Bev as the leader, and Richard before her. So, that ability to talk to people at the top to both help shape future direction, but also to kind of get a shared sense of understanding of what matters, what's important and what's expected. I think that's key to engaging those long-term, meaningful partnerships. I don't know if that exists in Birmingham or not, but it's one thing I'd want to be clear about with John Cotton, the leader of Birmingham, to say that we need to be together in this space. I think the second thing is the work we've done with the combined authority. And again, I'm not clear on what the relationships are. It's a new mayor in the West Midlands. So hopefully that's an opportunity, along with the new government, for that kind of relationship to be strengthened and kind of, again, move into that forward vision space about what's the art of the possible around here. Let's not forget Birmingham just pulled off a really successful Commonwealth Games. Manchester did that, and everything that I've done in 7 years here still has its roots back to the legacy of those Commonwealth Games, that absolute clarity of what it was going to do to act as a catalyst. I think Birmingham should be in the same space, really, and that's where those new relationships with the private sector need to get back to. What can be done well and brilliant and globally significant needs building upon so that the residents get to feel the benefit of those things.
And you're going as well with a network now of people and businesses from the built environment that are operating in that city as well already. So I imagine that must be a slightly softer landing than arriving here when you did 7 years ago.
Yes, that's great. Please all come, every single one of you. Place Birmingham. I look forward to the inaugural podcast. Yes, it is good to already establish some contacts. It's good to see that. I'm not surprised because as a kind of network of cities, when we go to MIPIM, when we go to UK Reef, Leeds, Birmingham, Manchester, we always talk to each other. So it's not a surprise to me to see that the good businesses and the connections between the built environment will continue. And so, business as usual, just different sites.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's interesting because, I wanted to talk about investment into the city, into Manchester, where it's come from over the past few years, where you think we should be looking. So your successor, where should they be looking? The first time we ever met was on the transfer bus from the airplane to Nice Airport. And
was this the one where we nearly died?
It might have been, yes.
To clarify, when they're talking about dying, that was at MIPIM. It was a flight from Manchester to Cannes, and it had encountered some turbulence and had a few rough moments, but no one died and no one was close to dying. Just to want to clarify that going forward.
But I wanted to come and say hello because I knew you, and I didn't know how many people you knew or you didn't know. And we've been working on that event for 7 years, trying to work out how to get the most money and investment into the city. So where should the money be coming from? What we'd like to see from investment in Manchester before you go and once you've left?
So we have been really successful, haven't we, with foreign direct investment, and that's as a result of being able to give long-term commitments and large sites and kind of 10, 15-year vision with certainty. And I think that's big, actually, that Manchester's done that. And there's not enough of that, I think, in any city, actually, that really has that, back to what we were talking about, that brave, bold leadership that says, look, we're after a developer partner here that's going to be with us for the long term and going to share those risks in terms of markets and values, but we're in it for the long haul. So, yes, number one, it's let's continue with the large-scale vision and the large-scale partnerships. I think funding from government has been different up here because we've had the combined authority for some time. We've now got Manchester now entering the single settlement next year, which should make it easier for that money to be spent faster, which is really what we want here. I mean, some of the frustration is even with devolved funding, the pace at which we can deliver on some of our schemes is still, it's not where I'd like it to be. So.
Has that slowed schemes down, do you think? Has that put off
it just hasn't been as fast as we'd like. So I think clearly incoming new government, I think they're already talking about increasing pace, aren't they? So that's great. And Manchester will definitely be at the front of queue for that. We've got the plans, we've got the commitment, we are ready to roll. I think, I don't know where other places are, but I know Manchester will be at the front of that queue. So really maximising out what the devolution arrangements and the maturity of the relationship between the city and the combined authority here, I think, is exemplary, really. So with Caroline in post, that continuation, look at what she's done in Stockport, fantastic, couldn't be a better person at the CA. So I think we'll just continue at pace here with Bev as leader, Caroline over there, Andy, dead clear what's needed in Manchester, and that will happen. I think the other thing that Manchester does really well is, where you started, it's that global reach and how we work with businesses to take brand Manchester and investable propositions globally to attract funding. So that will continue. I think that will be interesting in the future here. There's a number of new markets opening up. I mean, there's quite a lot happened in terms of culture and investment in culture in the city. Whether we can translate that into investment in infrastructure, I think, is the next stage for this city, because it's the infrastructure challenge that is probably the one that I'm leaving behind as the most unfinished business. That where we never got Piccadilly Station away, did I? Damn it, 7 years of achieving nothing there. That's probably one of my biggest regrets, but it wasn't all within my gift. But we need to move on rail connectivity. I think great work's been done on transport through the CA with B Network, and where we've had the wherewithal and the powers, I think we've really made that move. I think it's now expanding that connectivity and infrastructure point. And yeah, I have half pedestrianised Deansgate, but never quite got to see it as a tree-lined avenue where people strolled as if they were in Paris. But maybe more green space, public space, but not just seeing it as green space, but seeing it as interconnected infrastructure spaces. That's the next challenge here.
When you come back to the city in 20, 30 years and you walk around, what do you hope to see change?
Julia, I'll be coming back to this city every other weekend.
Yeah, but like, further down the line, let's get some time break. And you're like, oh, wow, they did that. That's the thing I wanted them to do. And
Oh, okay. So I don't think I want to wait 20 or 30 years for this. I think I really do want to see Piccadilly Gardens reimagined it's a really challenging public realm, isn't it? It's got millions of people walk through it every day, but how do you make that a kind of great gateway into the city? I'll be excited to see that. We're just out on Holt Town master planning now. I guess, if I was excited about kind of a big regeneration, the next big regeneration scheme, it's Holt Town. I'll have probably got to the point where I'll have finished the master planning, but I'll come back and see it when it's done. And I think if we can pull off the delivery of what's envisaged in Holt Town, that's going to be really exciting. Wythenshawe, that's a way. That's going to be good. And reimagine Wythenshawe. Why is that important? Because one of the things that we always wanted to signal, and Bev, again, very clear on this, is whilst the city centre's not finished, it's really important that all parts of Manchester are successful. So Wythenshawe's a real, kind of catalyst for that reimagined district centres and, the kind of connectivity point between the city and outlying areas. We need all of them to be successful, don't we? We can't have it all concentrated in one place. So Wythenshawe, I'll keep my eye on. Wythenshawe, I shall see what happens there. But yeah, I'll be interested to see Victoria North completed. And my God, if we end up with the hospitals finally, that's another one that's 7 years in the making and not quite landed it yet. But wouldn't it be great to see a new hospital built in Manchester? I'd enjoy that happening here. I really would.
And you didn't mention Strangeways, which you're leaving just as it's starting to get going.
Well, yeah, that's just, so Strangeways master plan, yeah, we're out with that. That's a joint one with Salford. And I didn't mention, one of the other attributes is how, I mentioned the combined authority, but how councils in Greater Manchester just work with each other where they need to outside of the combined authority is just as important. So I shall miss my neighbours in Salford very much. Strangeways, well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because what we really need is the prison relocated. So I write a Christmas wish list every year, and it was on my list for 2 years now to try to land a deal to relocate Strangeways. I haven't done it. It's one I've not pulled off. Maybe a new government, new conversation. Wouldn't it be great for Strangeways to get relocated, and that would open up that whole part of town to being reimagined, and I think that would be great.
You said it's on your Christmas wish list. Come on, Santa, get on it.
It's okay, he brought in a few other million for some other stuff. Can't be too greedy.
I've heard a little bit more about the projects that you hope will come through. What would you say is the path that you've put Manchester on? Or if you want to go with your earlier reference of just continuing it on its legacy, like what is that path? Where does it go?
So I think I would say the path that I've put Manchester on, that I would say will be continued, and it's very much Bev Craig's vision as much as anything I've played in terms of that bridge, as she called it, between maybe previous chief executive and me. I think it's been very much one that's rooted in that inclusive growth agenda. That's what I'm about. I'm a product of it. I'm somebody who local government created opportunities for, and I find myself with a regeneration background on the back of apprenticeships that were created in Birmingham. So I'm really clear that whatever happens in Manchester's next 20 or 30 years, the real test is that the residents of Manchester who live here feel the benefit of that. And that's a tough thing because the population's growing, it's changing. The city has a housing shortage. There are issues around the affordability of housing. We've talked about increased population in the city centre and less green space. Competing demands, aren't there, between jobs, houses, green space, infrastructure, net zero. I think the path we're on is one of saying we're honest about those challenges. Manchester owns the fact that it's still got 40,000 children living in poverty. It's still got, we're still the sixth most deprived city in the country. The path we're on is to change that. The path we're on, and the one that needs to be continued, is the one that moves the dial on those statistics as much as it does moves the dial on the delivery side of new building.
Can I ask then, Jack? Because it always, given we're media firm, it always makes me think: is that being communicated well enough? Because I wouldn't ever associate most of Manchester with being the sixth most deprived city in the country. I mean, that's just not good enough at all for our aspirations. It doesn't feel like that. I have lived in bits and parts of it that probably need improvement, and I'm sure there are other areas as well. But it doesn't get talked about in that vein, which obviously we don't want necessarily to talk about it in a light that isn't really positive. But that's what has to be talked about if we are to understand the problem.
Yeah, I don't think it's something the council shies away from. It's in our State of the City report. There's quite a lot of debates about it at council. We're just out consulting now on the new Our Manchester strategy, which I think will bring some of these things to the fore. But yeah, the simple truth is that we have got too many children living in poverty still. And we've got 40,000 households with below £30 a month disposable income. There is a differential in the city, and what we have to guard against here is that differential widening. So that's about putting as much effort into those programmes that connect people into work and to skills and to opportunities and to tackling people's ill health and those barriers to work, as it is creating the built environment to attract the jobs and the investment and the opportunities. All I'm saying is, if I started to bridge the gap of that kind of narrative around what's happening to the people in this city, as well as what's happening to the businesses and growth in this city, then I'm very proud to have done that. And that's what needs to continue. And I don't doubt it won't, because I know very much that that's at the heart of Bev's strategy too. So whoever replaces me will be working hand in hand with the leader of the council to continue on that agenda, the economic strategy that's set out.
And I know that you mentioned to me some months ago about trying to make sure we retain enough working space, interesting, developed working space for footfall and driving people into the city centre. So I think it was the Resolution Foundation, wasn't it, September last year? That was something you mentioned. Is that something that we're going to see more discussion about?
Yeah, I think this was in the context of both land availability in the city centre, and as I said, those competing pressures, aren't they, between protecting your land for commercial, protecting bits of land for green space, and also residential. So, these are trade-offs all the time. But the second bit of that, in the conversation we had, I think came from the point about we have got commercial space, but it's not grade A. And there's a big challenge, I think, in the city about repurposing and retrofitting. There was also linked to the changes in kind of some of the retail offer. So that is a massive agenda still in the city centre. So what we although I've said district centres are important, housing, placemaking across the whole city is important, the economic engine of Manchester city centre has to be protected at all costs, really, for the good of GM, actually. So, there is still work to be done, I think, on net zero retrofitting and repurposing of existing commercial space in the city. Again, it's on my all the things Joanne hasn't done. I'm seeing Julia write down as I'm speaking in this podcast. It will no doubt be published in a Place Northwest article to come.
Oh, it'll be fine. Don't worry. But I do want to get into our last question here. Obviously, our listeners are mostly those who work in the property industry. So what message would you give to them about the future of Manchester and how they should be working with government?
Carry on in the way that you are working with the city. As I've said, I think Manchester's ambitions and plans are clear. They haven't changed. I think the opportunities still exist here for, real, bold, imaginative thinking of creating the great places. So it's still a really exciting time. Manchester is very well placed with a new government, I think, to accelerate delivery. So I think this is the time where the industry should speak up about what does that look like. There's clearly conversations about planning reform coming. How do we speed up delivery? What is it that the private sector would like to see? This is the time for those dialogues, I think, to kind of really be energised about how does the Manchester public and private sector, or the triple helix, as we add it in, if we talk about innovation zones with the university, how does that really come together for the next 20 years of Manchester? I think this is an incredibly exciting time, isn't it, for the city? This is, despite me leaving, I'm leaving it at a point where I think it's well placed, but it now needs to set out that ambition, I think, really quickly about what it wants to see happening at pace and at scale in Manchester to protect it for the next 20 years, because there'll be other cities not too far away who will also be doing the same.
Oh, I like that little Birmingham threat there. Well, Joanne, thank you so much for joining us today. And on behalf of Place, we are all wishing you the best of luck over in Birmingham.
Thank you very much.
If you want to know more about what's going on in the built environment, check out placenorthwest.co.uk. I'm Julia Hatmaker. Thank you so much for listening and have a great rest of your day.